Well, hi there, everybody. Welcome to the Stratosphere Lounge. I'm your host, Bill Whittle, for the first show of 2019. Hey, 2019. I generally do better in. Oh, here we go. That idiot again. Hang on. It's this moron I keep on. Just always. I keep him on just to get my blood pressure up. Anyway, good to see everybody back after a long absence. It's good to be back. I think that the whole idea of New Year's is the most awesome idea in the history of man. It's just such a cool idea. There's just there's something about it. It's like, all right, we're going to reset the clock here. We're going to do this. We're going to do that, and then we get to start fresh. If the whole thing were just one giant continuous continuum, which is the best kind of continuum, it would just life would just feel like a series of one constant ongoing downhill failure. But this way, with a fresh start every 365 days, you get to break the failure up into little manageable bites, and that's what I think the magic of the holidays is all about. Anyway, so it's good to be here. Somebody was saying, is the sound a little out of sync? And I have to tell you, it looks a little out of sync here too, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It is a little tiny bit off. Why would that be? That doesn't make any sense. But should I try and fix it, or should I just let it go? It's just a tiny bit off. Hang on, let me try something. I will add another input source, and then maybe we'll have a stereoscopy. Add input capture. Audio input capture, yes. Select device. Rode Podcaster. Okay. Now, we turn off the other one, and this is where it gets a little dicey, but we're going to try it anyway. Yes. Am I still here? Is it any better? Not really. That's inexplicable. I can't explain it. All I can say at this point is please contact our support team at 1-800-695-5927. So probably the best thing to do, I imagine, in a case like this would be to, drink heavily. Not that that's not what usually goes on in this place, but nevertheless, the more drinks you have, the less the sync issue is going to bother you. So RK. That ought to get you going anyway. Get you started. It's good to be back, actually. We had a lovely holiday, and just before the holiday, I took my beautiful wife Natasha, who I love very much, who's watching the show right now. Hello, honey. We went to Disneyland, and we went on a Tuesday night before Christmas, and I thought, man, Tuesday night. Sorry, it was a Wednesday night. Wednesday night. Perfect. Nobody going to be there. It's going to be awesome. We'll have the place pretty much all to ourselves. And we got there, and the line of cars going into the parking lot was, 10-minute line just to pay for the parking. And what I discovered was, just by sheer random accident, I managed to pick the last day for people who had annual passes to come during the year. And I think it was also a free day or discount day for city employees or something. I've never, ever, ever seen Disneyland or Disney World, for that matter, that packed. But it was great fun. We had a good time. There's when you buy the tickets, and they're not inexpensive tickets. Dave Big Booty would like to know if Natasha will participate in the chat. She watches the show right now. She watches the chat too. I imagine she could do that. I don't know if she's got a sign up yet. but I can take care of that when we get back home. Anyway, so it was really busy. But here's the thing: so you pay like an outrageous amount of money. It's like $130 to get in, and then for this is the part that blew my mind. For an extra $10, you can get a fast pass, which means you go to the front of the line, and a 45-minute wait becomes a 5-minute wait, and it's an extra $10 for the night, which is over a 6-7 hour stay. You probably do 10 rides. It's $1 a ride to save 45 minutes. And it's like I just simply couldn't believe that everybody didn't have this thing. But now that I'm a rich, successful capitalist, I love to lord it over the little people, the peons, the great unwashed, as I simply stroll past these filthy savages. And go to the front of the line where I belong, obviously. Anyway, it was really fun, and the only thing I have to say about it was my favorite ride experience, not my favorite entertainment experience, but without question, it's my favorite experience ever in any theme park ever by a wide margin. Is the Haunted Mansion, but we got there. And it was Haunted Mansion for the holidays, which means that every single cool thing about the Haunted Mansion was covered up by orange, glow-in-the-dark, fluorescent UV boxes, and every single weird creature out of Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas. So Haunted Mansion became all about Jack Skellington. And I was looking around saying, what happened to the cool woman there? She's about this big, and her dress is blowing in the wind, and she's talking to you. And what happened to the ghosts that are riding with you? And what happened to this? And what happened to that? Gone. I was very disappointed. But it turned out it was just that only ride, and the rest of it was really pretty cool. So anyway, we had a lot of fun, and we had a great Christmas. And we had an especially great New Year because, New Year's for the Russians is, it's New Year's plus Christmas plus 4th of July, all rolled into one big happy day. And I will just tell you one little brief story about this. I talked to my wife about this earlier, so I suppose this one's cleared. When you spend 4 or 5 hours, it takes at least 2 hours, maybe 3. But when you spend 4 or 5 hours completely surrounded by people that speak a different language and playing different music, it gives me just a taste of what my wife has to go through kind of on a daily basis here. You're sitting here surrounded by music that you don't know, and people come up to you and start asking you questions in a language you don't speak, and it's an experience. So they were playing Russian hits from the 60s and 70s. It's Christmas. It's just like Christmas music that we would have, except it's not so. It's much more of a rock and roll kind of a Christmas, New Year's thing. There's no like carols. There's nothing kind of religious about the Russian holiday because 70 years of Bolshevism will take that right out of you. So anyway, I was in there in this restaurant we were there 5 hours, I would say at least that. And I was listening to 4 hours of Russian folk songs, and after about 4.5 hours of this, I was feeling like I'd pretty much got the hang of what Russian folk songs sound like, which is kind of like Mexican folk songs to me. It sounds very much the same. And by the way, that opening song was not Mexican. It was Argentinian. The band that we played on the warm-up was called the Pinguos and Los Pinguos. And the reason I like Los Pinguos so much was because I was working as an editor back in 2001 on a talent show. You may remember that Ed McMahon did Star Search. Well, a year or two after that got canceled, Ed McMahon came up with a completely new show, utterly completely new, called Ed McMahon's Next Big Star. And Pingos won that competition. I got to watch him perform 4 or 5 times, and in any event, I thought they were awesome and tremendous energy, and I just love that song. So there you go. I may actually put some English songs into rotation, songs in English based on what I'm about to say. So anyway, here we are, and I, needless to say, I didn't drink a lot of vodka, but there was so much vodka in the room that just the evaporation fumes pretty much knock you back pretty hard. And so anyway, 4.5 hours into this, all of a sudden, this live band, semi-live, guys on a keyboard, guy on a guitar, a couple of women singers singing live, and the rest of it's canned background track. But all of a sudden, after 4.5 hours, somewhere around 3 o'clock in the morning, they decided to sing Hotel California, and I know this is really obnoxious, and I've already apologized for this, so I'll just wallow in my own crapulence. But when that song came on, I thought, first of all, oh, this is actual music. Number one, this is real music, and secondly, it was great to know the words and know what was coming, and it's just, I was just bursting with pride. I was just bursting with pride on Hotel California. It was something, and it's especially cool to hear Hotel California sung by a guy who does not speak a lick of English, sung phonetically. You can tell. It was like, let me think about so it started out like, on a darker highway, a cool wander, my dear. So fresh up allegiance, rising to up the air. He wasn't getting the words, he wasn't getting the rhythm wrong, but he was just taking a general shot at it. And every now and then you'd catch kind of where he was in the song. He'd get 2 or 3 words in a row, pretty much right on time and on key and everything. He's a good singer, don't get me wrong. It was just the lyrics were a little spotty. So somewhere in the middle of the song, you'll be sitting there going, I'm pretty sure this is still Hotel California. And then he'll say, so I call the bring captain to bring me my vine. And then he said, and we haven't had that spirit here. And I said, since 1969, I said, I know where we are. This is definitely the song. But anyway, I'm not a huge Eagles fan, and I wouldn't call it my favorite song, but I have to tell you, how's they dance in the courtyard? Sweet summer sweat. Well done. A knot 47 for you. Well done. I like anybody who can type out an accent is strong with me. But it was really cool, and really made me proud, and not in a little stupid way either. It's kind of like, you're listening to 6 hours of music that's been played on every single Russian New Year for the last half century practically, and in the middle of this is Hotel California. And it just gives you an indication of just how powerful and how far-reaching that culture is. It really is kind of amazing, and it was a really cool moment. Then we went back to our table where they served. She's going to kill me. It's an amazing culture. I met my wife because I was so deep into Russian culture. I have a very, very high regard for Russian culture. But my limited experience with it is that Russian food is essentially thinly sliced matter with some kind of that has been pickled somehow. Pickled matter, sliced thin, and then put under the sliming machine. I can't describe it any better than that. Um, it's an acquired taste, and I imagine it's acquired after you haven't had any food for 25 days, something like that. Anyway, that was my big holiday story. I'm glad to be in 2019. I really, really, really needed a reboot. I really did, and so it's time to get started. I'd like to thank all of you who survived um, the 2018 website Tsunami Adventure. We're working on that. I have to tell you too. I don't imagine he's watching now. I hope he's not. And by the way, thank you, Eric. He says, "What's worse, Russian food or British food?" Now, just in full fairness here, uh, I am one half English, one quarter German, and one quarter Portuguese. And so I can say without any hesitation whatsoever that the only food that I've had consistently that's worse than Russian food is English food by a wide margin. English food is absolutely horrible. You know, jellied eels and toad in the hole, and I mean, it's just plain awful. It's horrible, horrible. Um, anyway, yeah, Natasha made me a borscht very early in our relationship, and it was red. It was you bring a spoonful of the borscht up, and it was the color that you would paint, like safety jackets on people. So if they were working on the highway late at night, they would not get hit by a car. So it's just kind of red. And if you like beets, it's very, very, very delicious. But we don't get a whole lot of beets here in the American diet, unless they feed beets to delicious, delicious cows. Uh, but anyway, bangers and mash. Good God, here we go. We're going to start the list of British food. It's just horrendous. Um, I'm not going to go too deep into this either because had shot it last week and I still haven't gotten to it. I have to do a little editing on it. But I did last week's right angle. We shot this week's right angle this morning at 6 o'clock here. It's 36 degrees, which is pretty cold in LA. But last week I did a right angle, and I don't want to give too much of it away because I can show pictures on the right angle. But I did go on December 27th to see a movie that was shown twice, once on December 21st and once on December 22nd, one day only. It was a documentary made by Peter Jackson from Lord of the Rings, and it was called They Shall Not Grow Old. And wow. Basically, in 2014, the British Imperial Museum asked Jackson if he would do a documentary on the First World War, and his only instructions were it'd be nice if it were something that were just kind of different, unique. So, so Peter Jackson gets 100 hours of black and white footage in various stages of repair, and and so then what he did was he decided to he handed it off to his effects company, Weta Workshop, which I think is the best special effects house in the world. I just think it's astonishing. We saw Mortal Engines, which is a movie of his, and it was also just visually just astonishing. So here's what Peter Jackson did. He gave him a couple of tests, and what they did was when you look at World War I footage, it's always comical because they're marching so fast, and they don't even look like people. They look like ants. They shot that footage at a standard of 16 frames per second. In the documentary about how he made this movie, he says It was supposed to be 16 frames a second. If it shoot it at 16 and you project it at 24, needless to say, it's going to play fast. So he said, but none of them were ever the same. No, every single clip he had were slightly different frame rates because there was a guy out in the field cranking the camera. Movies were brand new in movie recordings out in the field during the Great War. So what Peter Jackson did was he took this scratched, grainy, very fast footage and took a couple of clips and handed it to his special effects team. And you'll see this in the right angle, which I hope to have up tomorrow. And the shot they used to open the trailer is a shot of the British tanks in World War I, the ones with the treads that went all the way around. And you see them, and they're in grainy black and white, and they're moving fast. And then this thing dissolves, and all of a sudden, it is like he had taken a modern camera and put it right next to the other one and filmed the exact same tank going over the exact same thing. So what they did was, first of all, they had to stop, get the thing running in real time, and that meant that if you're going to take it from 16 frames a second to 24 frames a second, you're out of frames. There's just not enough frames to fill a second if it's 24 frames a second. So the first thing they had to do was write software that would allow that allowed the computer to draw frames between frames. It would look at frame number 1 and frame number 2, and it would add frame number 1.5 wherever they were needed. And so when he slowed it down to, well, technically when he speeded it up, but when it appears to be slowed down, and Simon says just posted a link, and it's astonishing. So what they did was, since there's no missing frames, and since they're not reprinting a frame, like frame print, like sometimes makes it look choppy, since there's 24 frames a second when it was only recorded at 16, the computer has drawn in the additional 8 frames a second. Sorry. Yes. And so the motion is perfectly smooth. That's the first thing he did. Second thing he did was he took all of the scratches and pops and everything out of it, so that even the black and white footage is absolutely pristine. He added color and went to a great deal of color to colorize every frame. I did not know this, but he's an enormous World War I buff. That's why he got it. He owns hundreds of World War I uniforms, so they just go to Peter Jackson's closet and find out what the actual color should be. So the colorization was fantastic. Then using computer magic that still I know how they did the other stuff, but this still amazes me. They made it into 3D. And so you go from seeing this rickety black and white footage of this ancient looking tank, and on that link you'll see it in the trailer, and it just morphs into 3-dimensional color at real speed. And then the actual genuine genius of it was the whole story is told through the voices of World War I veterans, none of whom are around anymore. But as it turns out, the BBC did a number of interviews with World War I vets back in the 60s. So you've got literally hundreds of voices telling the story, put together a tremendous narrative. And the last little piece of work that he did is, I think, actually was to me the most effective and the most moving. So now he had what used to be black and white film of guys marching and talking and pointing and stuff. Got it slowed down, got the picture sharp, increased the sharpness using computer algorithms, and then he's got this beautiful 3-dimensional colorized film of World War I that has no audio at all. And so what he did was he hired forensic lip readers, and they watched the footage very carefully and repeatedly, and they found out what everybody on camera was actually saying. And then, this is why Peter Jackson is a genius and not just a good filmmaker. And then what he did was he did the research on whatever particular regiment or unit you were looking at. And if it was a Yorkshire regiment, he hired actors from that part of England so that the accents would be exactly the same. And when you hear these guys speaking and see them in color, in 3D, in what looks like real time, it's just unspeakably moving, and really genuinely felt like going back in time. If the link is still there if you scroll up on the comment section here, if you're watching this, we'll try and remember to post it on the YouTube version. But there's a couple things that movie did, and Foghorn's got it. It's a time machine. That's exactly what it is. And I realized this is just the beginning of it. The ability for the computer to take, not just to make a you could get good computer graphics of a tank. And in fact, there's a Battlefield 1 is a World War I set game, and that's pretty astonishingly real looking. It's exceedingly unrealistic in terms of its action, but it looks very good. But what you see is it really go back in time. And when you see the faces of these guys, and you hear them speaking in their language, it's unbelievable. One of the points Jackson made, because the movie was about an hour long, and then attached to the back of it was a half-hour documentary on how they made the movie, which was nearly as interesting as the movie. And he said what they found making the documentary was the same problem that the filmmakers at the time had, the actual people who shot the footage. And that problem is that since no one in World War I had ever seen a movie camera before, they could not get the soldiers to do what they're supposed to do. Every single shot is nothing but a bunch of guys looking at the camera. And reminds me of Francis Ford Coppola in Apocalypse Now, in his little cameo. Don't look at the camera. Just keep shooting, keep running. Don't look at the camera. Everybody's looking at the camera. They've never seen anything like it before. They're all smiling, not all smiling, waving and stuff. So this movie starts with a little screen within a screen, and it's shot in the square, 3x4 image format, much more square than what we see now, which is a much more pleasing frame, this wide-angle HD frame. And so you're in a theater, you've got a wide screen like this, but it's kind of choked down on strongly on the sides, a little bit on the top and the bottom, and it's got a little rounded vignette. And what he's done is he's taken the black and white footage. This is how it starts for about a half an hour. He's taken the black and white footage. He's gotten all of the pops out of it, and he's gotten all of the scratches out of it, and he sharpened it, and he made it in 3D. So it looks like you're looking through a hole that somebody cut in the movie screen, and then this black and white footage is back there beyond there. And I thought, okay, so he's gonna do something where he's gonna transform this black and white film into color. And that's exactly what he did. But what really surprised me was I thought he was going to do this within 30 seconds or something. You watch 20 minutes, maybe almost a half an hour, something like that. 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes of World War I footage the way you would expect to see it, sped up, black and white, but razor sharp and in 3D. And I thought, when is he going to get to the punch here? I mean, does he only have 4 minutes of effects? And that's what we saw in the trailer, the whole thing. And it took me a while to figure out. In fact, I didn't figure out what he was doing until the end of the movie. And then he didn't tell me. Before they got to the documentary during the credits, I realized exactly what he was doing. So it gives you about 15, 20 minutes or more of the footage the way you're used to seeing it. And I knew he was going to take one shot that was going to show us it was going to go from the old footage to the new footage. And I was sure it was going to be the tank shot, because the tank shot just happens to be so unbelievably, astonishingly powerful. I got to click on that link that John C. Pershing put up there. I just got to click on that. Hopefully, I will look at that later. Okay, so where are we? So you're seeing all this black and white footage, and I wondered, where is he going to do the move? And I thought it was going to be something spectacular. And I thought, Okay, I know what he'll do. We've seen the training, we've seen people enlisting, we hear the voices of the veterans. It's all in black and white. The second that there's an explosion in war, the first boom, that's when we're going to go to the color and the 3D and all that stuff. But that's not when he did it. He did it on a shot of young British soldiers walking along a road, a sunken road, on their way to the front, and every one of them looking at the camera as they went by. And again, the genius of the guy is he found a face that was so young, extremely young, probably the kid was probably 16, and so amazed by it. And so you see these stick figures, and then it just slows down, and then this color comes in, and the 3D comes in, and the blue eyes of the kid start to come in, and he's pushed in. He's pushed in hard on that frame. The software is astonishing, keeping it really sharp, and you're looking at this kid's face as he's looking at this movie camera, and you just make the connection. You just make the human connection that you never made before, which is that these are real people. If you've ever seen pictures of Hitler in color, they had color film in World War II. They didn't have it in World War I. But if you've seen, especially movie film of Hitler in color, there's some color film that was shot up at Berchtesgaden. And when you see Hitler in color, it's almost like he was a real guy. And when you see all of these things in color in World War II, you start thinking, oh, seeing it in color, it actually happened. It was real. And when he did that with World War I, it just was astonishing. And it was especially difficult technically because the things that he had to colorize are things that don't colorize well. He had to colorize skin tone. That's not easy. It's a really tough thing to get right. And he had to colorize mud, and he had to colorize grass, and he found out real early that if you just made the grass green, it looked fake, that the grass had different shades of green depending on how it was growing and how thick it was. And he did all of that stuff. And the reason I know that the colorization was so powerful was because the whole war was mud colored, the whole thing. It was, the British were in muddy khaki, just nothing but mud that was churned up. They're brown and green ground, blue sky, pale blue sky. And the reason that you could tell that the colorization was so good was the only time the color really hit you was when you saw the blood. And blood came out so red. It was just so shockingly red. You never, ever get that looking at a black and white picture of World War I. You'll see a guy and he'll have a bandage on his hand or something, and it's stained darker, and you know he's bleeding, but you just don't process it. But when you see that red just leaping out at you like that, it's unbelievable. And to colorize the dead, you get to see where they were hit, and it's simply unbelievable. They spent a fair amount of time on a shot. Some footage they had was taken just a short time, like an hour or half an hour before an offensive, and they weren't in trenches. I thought they had lots and lots of stuff in the trenches, but this particular assault was being launched from a sunken road and looked a lot like the hedgerows in World War II. And you see this group of, 10 or 15 British soldiers, British Tommies, and they know they're going to go over the top in 15, 20 minutes. And they're trying not to look scared, but one of them looks really scared. And then Peter Jackson, in the Making of documentary, shows photographs that he took a year ago from that exact same location, and the road looks exactly the same. So now you can see the sunken road as it appeared to them, because it's a 4K beautiful, razor sharp modern image of this scene, which you've just seen in the movie, and now your mind can put those guys there and and make the connection. And after you've basically done this little bit of mental trickery by looking at a modern photograph of the scene with all of the landmarks and everything exactly the same, you can see where the guys must have stood. You can remember where each individual guy was and leaning against a shovel and all the rest of it. And then, because he's a great filmmaker, went back, showed the shot, showed the British soldiers there in the same place. Yeah, the sunken lane. Yeah, we just saw it. Great. And then he said, turned out that this unit, when they went over the top, suffered something like 85% killed. And he said virtually everybody that you're looking at in the shot was being filmed in the last 30 minutes of their life. Man. It's just that part of it is almost it's almost a little obscene in a way, to hear that and to see them again and see the faces again. This is their last 15, 20, 30 minutes alive. In 20 minutes from now, they're going to blow that stupid whistle, and these guys are going to jump over the side of that embankment, and 1 in 5 is going to come back. And the expression on the face of one of those guys, he's just so wide-eyed, and you don't often see that. And you don't, and certainly they show movies, and I've seen World War I movies, and I've seen actors playing scared in World War I movies, and they're going, oh, Sergeant, they're acting scared, and it's great. And I've seen a lot of movies with well acted World War I scenes, and I've seen lots of actors play scared very well. I think probably Gallipoli was the best example of that. Gallipoli, before the charge at the end of Gallipoli, it's just fantastic. It's just heartbreaking. But the look on this guy wasn't a look of, gee, Sarge, I'm scared. He didn't. If you were to direct the scene and have an actor play it scared, he wouldn't look like what this guy looked like. This guy had an expression on his face, huge wide eyes, but his expression strikes me as the expression of somebody who simply could not believe where he was. He couldn't believe where he was, and he couldn't believe what he was going to have to do. It wasn't the 1,000-yard stare you get after combat. It was just this. It was like you could see it in his eyes. This is some kind of terrible nightmare, and I'm going to wake up from it any moment now. And it's unbelievable. So just to cap this off, so you see 15, 20 minutes, 25 minutes of black and white footage in the beginning. Then he opens the screen up, you go to widescreen, color, 3-dimensional, 24 frames a second with the voiceover. You can hear what the guys are saying, lots and lots of joking. The thing that blew me away was not only on the video, but the veterans doing the recreation. They're talking about how much fun they had, Oh, it was a blast. It was a lark. Yes, it's true. It was dangerous on the front, but, we're just a bunch of chaps. And you'd think that attitude would go away, but it actually didn't. And when the end of the war comes, you see these guys sitting on the road after the armistice has been announced, and they're just depressed. Obviously, they're blown out emotionally, but you hear these guys again and again and again saying, I felt like I just got fired and I was made redundant on a job that I'd been doing for 4 or 5 years, and I was let down and disappointed. What am I going to do now? And just, you'd think they'd be jumping for joy, but no one was jumping for joy. They were just plain just disbelief and sadness. And again, I'm telling you all this because you have to go to the effort to see this. Undoubtedly, it'll be released on some kind of pay-per-view very soon. You got to watch this film, because I don't know how many times I have read about World War I and read about the armistice, which happens at 11 o'clock in the morning on the 11th day of the 11th month, and so on. And you hear people describe, and you read it on pages, and you hear people describe, and the gunfire basically just ended. And that's an evocative image, and but it's you're reading it, or Steve Darrow, it's called "They Shall Not Grow Old," a documentary about World War One. And so when you hear that the gunfire just died away, you think, oh, it must have been something. But they showed these guys milling around, and you could hear them talking to each other, and in the background was just sparse, pretty light shell fire, but just you've spent the last entire hour with nothing but exploding shell sounds. That's all you've had in the background. And they're real sharp sounds too. It's not that kind of gas explosion. It's real crisp, like, boom, And you're watching these guys milling around, and you hear, and you just hear the echo, and that's the end of the war. So the final thing I'll say about this, and actually I think what the most amazing gift of this film is this. He starts you off in black and white at 16 frames a second and gives you a good long dose of it so that you get used to seeing World War I footage. This is what World War I footage looks like. Guys marching very fast, and they're sped up because they were recorded at a slower speed. So he starts with 25 minutes of that or so. And then so when he makes the move to 24 frames a second, 3D color with sound, it just blows you away. Just absolutely blows you away. But then at the end of the movie, he does something that's just absolute crazy genius. And that is the final 5 minutes of the movie or so. He goes back to the black and white at 16 frames a second. And the reason that's so brilliant is that after watching this hour of 3D color, when the black and white footage comes back, I swear, your mind does what the computer has been doing for the last hour. You will watch this footage, and your mind will just automatically put it into 3D and put it into normal speed and get the color right, and you'll hear the voices and the accents, and you'll never look at World War I footage again the same way, because what Jackson did in that hour was he trained your brain on how to look at this footage the way it actually was. And you can apply that, obviously not to the same effect, but you can apply it to regular World War I footage. The link is if somebody wants to post the link again, that's great. It's been up there for those live. We'll try to remember to put it up on YouTube. But what Peter Jackson did was not just great filmmaking. Peter Jackson in this movie, I was almost going to say he did a public service, but cleaning up garbage on the side of the freeway is a public service. Peter Jackson is the first one, and this is the part that's most exciting about They Shall Not Grow Old. Peter Jackson gave us these people back, and you spend an hour with them, and you hear them joking, and boy, you want to talk about bad teeth. And just what terrible physical condition they were in before they got in the Army. I mean, my whole half of my family is from there. It's from Lancashire, and they're all mill workers and coal miners, and they had teeth like that, and I used to have teeth like that. And it's when you see how scrawny they are. That's the only word for them. How it's kind of stooped and scrawny, and they're one guy in 100 has all his teeth. Half of them have half of their teeth, and the rest of them are missing 3 or 4, and they're just shocking. It's just really unbelievable how awful these guys look. In fact, they show hundreds and hundreds of faces during World War I, and they come to this one guy because there's only one guy in the entire war, as far as we could see, who looked handsome. He was a handsome guy. He was a young, handsome guy with a nice smile. He looked like he was the only modern person in the entire war. So, anyway, it's absolutely magnificent, and now that it's been done and done so well, it's obviously going to win best documentary of the year. No, there's no question about that. But now that it's done and the power of it hits you, then that technology can not only be applied to other World War I footage, but think about what they can do with World War II, because the World War II footage is in much, much better shape than the World War I footage, shot at the same frame rate. Most of it's black and white. But if he can colorize and then lip sync and add sound effects to World War I footage, what he can do with World War II will bring World War II to life in a way that we've never seen it before, and I expect that's just a couple years away from now. Like I said, when you see the it's all mud and grass and skin tones, and then the blood is just so red it just knocks your eyes out, it just comes at you, and it's just like, oh my God. So yeah, Anat. I'm sorry, my eyes did not what Anat 47 yet. Says modern medicine and nutrition have amazing effects. No, it does have amazing effects. Have you ever looked at a high school picture of high school seniors from, let's say, 1915? They all look like they're 40. And having seen high school picture graduations from the class of 2018 rather than 1918, they all look like they're 11. I don't think you could find the ugliest kid in a classroom today and have him not be just an absolute knockout 100 years ago. And Dave Big Booty was saying he was on the Uss Midway museum ship yesterday, and it brought naval combat home for him. Yeah, I've been doing nothing but reading Leyte Gulf. I've just been saturating in it. I was going to spend time talking about that. I might do it again. But I've just been absolutely lost in the 4 battles that made up the Battle of Leyte Gulf, and I keep reading the same story again and again and again by different authors because I just can't get enough of it. It was amazing, and so I'm looking forward to the They Shall Not Grow Old treatment of World War II footage, which will be. It's not the same as a produced drama. I thought Band of Brothers was excellent, unbelievably good. I thought The Pacific was far worse, but still had some amazing moments in it. But it's still acting, and I can't put my finger on it. I talked a little bit about it a minute ago about the guy who had that terrified look, but there's something about the actual reaction that is different than the dramatic reaction. And my experience, having watched as much of this as I can soak up, is that experience is not anything that either actors or directors can connect to, and so they always play what they think it must be like, and they're trying to do their very best job. Certainly, if I was ever directing a film about World War I or World War II, prior to seeing this Jackson thing anyway, I believe you had a guy who was terrified. I'd have an actor make him look terrified. I wouldn't have an actor looking around in disbelief like he woke up in Norway, or like he woke up in Baghdad. That's the look that this guy had when he was scared. He didn't have this just sheer disbelief that he was going to have to go over there and get killed in 15 minutes. It's interesting you mentioned the Midway. There was one of the escort carriers, Lancome Bay, Fanshawe Bay, one of those jeep carriers, was named USS Midway just immediately right after the battle, and then they realized, or maybe it was one of the destroyers or escorts, but I think it was one of the jeep carriers. And the Battle of Midway just happened, so the next ship they commissioned, they named the USS Midway. And once they've done this and laid the keel and started building the USS Midway, which is a Kaiserkoffen, just a jeep carrier, a little, slow, tiny little aircraft carrier, it suddenly dawns on people, we really should do something a little more impressive with Midway. So the original Midway, I don't know, it might have been the same hull. I suspect it was the same hull. So then the next of the big Essex class carriers comes out, and they name that Midway, which meant they had to change the name of the previous ship to either Fanshawe Bay or Lascaux Bay. It was one of the Taffy 3 ships, I think. And sailors say that if you ever have a ship that's name is changed, that's incredibly bad luck, and there it goes. So I kind of think Midway was one of just a few carriers that started out as World War II carriers, straight deck carriers, and then they added the angled deck because Midway came pretty late to the war and served in Korea and Vietnam and past that. But it set sail a week after World War II ended. How about that? Okay, Gambier Bay, thank you very much, Teddy. And Dave, I didn't know that Midway didn't even make it into the war. So anyway, so Midway was interesting because it started out. I've seen a plan view looking down on Midway, the USS Midway, and here it is starting out as an Essex class a carrier, and here it is a change. And here's another change. Here's another change. Another change. Another change. And it's an amazing ship. I'd love to go see it. I've been dying to get down there and go see it. But Leyte Gulf and. I mean, I've read the story of the Samuel Roberts and the Johnston, and I think that the USS Hull gets really shortchanged because that destroyer was in there too. It just got hit earlier and didn't do as much damage. So it was the first one to sink. But nevertheless, the story of USS Johnston and USS Samuel B. Roberts. Why has that movie not been made? I can't understand why that movie was not made. It's simply the best story ever, and I've talked about it before. I'm not going to spend any more time on it right now, but it was absolutely incredible. Anyway, that's our little walk in the park we usually do in the beginning. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go to the questions, and we'll do that. Oh, by the way, after these guys on these destroyer escorts, which is essentially the size of a large tugboat, it's 2/3 the size of a destroyer, and destroyers are tin cans. Their armor is, the destroyer escort, the hull was probably, I think, 1/2-inch steel. It went up against the Yamato, which had, I want to say, 20 inches of steel, more maybe. So these guys go sailing in there, and they basically saved the entire landing with the courage from basically 2 or 3 ships just on their own, just go charge this Japanese juggernaut. And Hull sinks, Johnston sinks, Roberts sinks, and was it Gambier Bay, one of the escort carriers, sinks. But the guys go charging into battle to save these slow escort carriers, and their ships are sunk underneath them, and they're losing. They lost half or a third of their crew in combat. Yeah, 20 inches of steel, at least that much. It's the battleship armor is amazing. So these vessels sink, and it's not like we don't know where they are, because the entire U.S. Navy was gunning them down when the Japanese fleet turned around. And a pilot or two came over after the battle, American pilot, came in low. It was in an Avenger. He saw the guys in the water, wagged his wings so they knew that he saw them. And they expected they'd be picked up within a couple of hours of being in the water. Well, it turns out that because of the radio silence, the guy was not able to report their position, and by the time he got back to the carrier, he'd gotten the coordinates wrong, and they started looking for these guys 200 miles away from where they were, or something like that. So after this incredible act of heroism, surrounded by the entire U.S. Navy, essentially, these guys spend a day in the water, covered in oil, which actually saved a lot of them from sunburn, and then they spend a night in the water when the sharks come around, and then they spend another day in the water, and then they spent a second night in the water when, by this time, virtually every one of them had drunken so much salt water that they were hallucinating, including the captain of the Roberts thing. You know, they would be floating, and one guy would see a beach party with men in tuxedos and ladies in gowns, and another guy thought that that there was fresh water just immediately below where he was. That there was a pool of fresh water directly below the raft that he was floating on, and some of them would just simply dive down to get it, and they'd never be seen again. But one story that you guys just need to know about. There was a young guy from Oklahoma named Charles Natter, and he was a big Oklahoma, farm boy, and very good swimmer, former lifeguard. And when the Roberts sank, they ended up in two groups. The big group had the captain and a number of executive officers. There was a different group with much worse outcomes that just had a couple of brand new ensigns. And this is not the Indianapolis. This is the Samuel B. Johnson. Indianapolis was worse, but this was plenty bad. So these sharks would start coming, and there was a small group of guys, maybe 10 guys, that were on floating planks. They just threw these planks overboard, grabbed onto them, and it was, and they were 100 yards or maybe a little more, 200 yards away from the main group, which had some rafts and netting and so on. And that's where the captain and where most of the survivors were. And they were calling over to these guys on the planks to come, and they'd been so traumatized and exhausted and badly wounded in many cases that most of them just decided not to swim to get over there. They were going to stay on the planks. So this guy, Charlie Natter, who had been a lifeguard, who entered the water pretty much completely unwounded, and just if anybody's going to make it, it's going to be him. So he swims over to help one of these guys, and because he's a lifeguard, he takes one of these guys off the planks, swims 100 yards out there, gets him, swims 100 yards back with him, gets him on the raft, and then he goes back for another one. And Natter did this 8 times. And on the 9th trip, he was about to get his friend out of these planks, and a shark took the friend right in front of his eyes. Just guy starts screaming, and he disappears under the water. And just a few seconds later, shark came up and ripped Charlie Natter to shreds. Just pulled him under the water and never seen again. What do you do about that? I don't know why. I don't know why everybody doesn't know that guy's name. I really, really don't. It's a mystery to me. They're just they should know Evan's name, and they should know Copeland's name, and they should know the names of all of these people. But that Natter, I mean, that and then another gunner named Carr. I forget his first name. I think it was John. He was in one of the two 5-inch turrets on the Samuel Roberts on the destroyer escort. A 5-inch gun literally bounces off of the armor of cruisers, even battleships and cruisers. You hit it. If you hit it in the side of the hull, the round just bounces off. You might as well shot him with a .22. But what these guys were doing is Johnson and Roberts were putting out so much fire so fast, and they were just aiming for the bridge and aiming for the superstructure, and they turned away. They turned away the force. They scared this Japanese battle group away. And the guy was in the number. I think it was in the number 2 gun, the stern gun on the Roberts. I'm probably going to get these numbers wrong, but it's very close. They had each one of these turrets had 345 shells. It might have been a different number, but I'm pretty sure it was 345. And they got out something like 335 shells in record time, and just unbelievable how fast they were. They were just so well trained. The skipper had been so good about these drills, and this aft turret, especially the first turret, was amazing, but the after turret was just unbelievable. It was almost like automatic, like boom, boom. They're just burning these shells out there. And one of the gun directors was this kid named Carr. And something like 10 or 15 rounds before they got to the end of the ammunition, literally run out of shells. They've shot everything. They're shooting illumination shells, the kind of things that go up on parachutes. They're shooting those off the side of the battleship. They're shooting anything they got in whatever order they got. They're just shooting them. And, something like 10 rounds before they run out of ammunition, the turret takes a hit and it knocks out the gas ejection system. So basically what happens is you fire off a shell and there's this superheated gas from the explosion, and it is blown out of the breech, I guess, or out of the barrel, one or the other. But it's that super hot gas is blown out to keep the gun cool. And so that gas ejection system failed, which meant that when they'd open the breech, it was very, very hot in there. And every time they'd fire another round, it got hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter. And on the 344th out of the 345 rounds that they had, they put the shell in there, they put the powder charge in there, and the gun was so hot. And they knew this was coming. It was a surprise to them. They put the charge in there, and the charge just exploded with the breech open. Killed everybody in the turret, I think, with one exception. And when other guys from the ship got there, this guy Carr, who'd been loading that gun, I did tell this last time, I'll tell it again, I'm going to tell it 1,000 times if I have to, had been, the force of the explosion had ripped him open from his collarbone to his groin. He was just literally just split open like a baked potato, and he's holding one of these 5-inch shells, and he's begging the guys who came in to rescue him, begging them to help him load the shell into this gun, which is just completely twisted metal. And so they say it's okay, John. They take the shell out of his hands, put it on the deck, sit him down, take some wounded guys out of the turret, set them on the deck, go back in the turret to get Carr, and Carr's picked up the shell again, and he's trying to get it into this gun. But we know everything the Kardashians are doing, so it's I used to bang my head against the wall about these things. I don't do that anymore. I try not to do that anymore. I realize now that it's not the number of people who know these things; it's that somebody knows these things. And as long as these stories are told, that's all that really matters. So at that happy note, and it is a happy note. No, final note. So the Samuel B. Roberts, the destroyer escort was the smallest warship that the Navy had in World War II. and they said it was the destroyer escort that fought like a battleship, just turned right in and headed the Yamato. By the way, Yamato and Musashi, the biggest, most powerful warships ever created, in complete secrecy because they were a violation of the treaties at the time. These two super battleships that the Japanese had put so many resources into these two monster giant battleships, which they kept close to port because they were national symbols. They were just national honor. And so when they finally sortied out there for the Battle of Leyte Gulf, Yamato and its sister ship Musashi, sailing one right in front of the other, the most powerful warships in the world with 18-inch guns. The captain, the admiral commanding them, didn't know how big the guns were until he got aboard, and then they had to refer to them as special 16-inch guns because 18-inch guns were illegal and never been made before. So the Yamato and the Musashi could throw a shell 25 miles. The Johnson could throw a shell 7 miles. He had to get into range. But here's the thing. The Japanese put so many resources into these two incredible prestige battleships. And then when they finally sailed off into battle, in the first stage of the Battle of Leyte Gulf, this incoming surface fleet was caught by American naval aircraft and Air Force aircraft, Army aircraft based on the islands. And they sank the Musashi, and the Musashi had never fired a round out of those guns. Just as she was going under, they started to fire a couple of anti-aircraft rounds. They wanted to keep the guns pristine for the big surface battle, the big decisive battle that's coming. But the Musashi never, ever fired those guns at a surface vessel. They fired a couple of rounds of this, air-bursting mega shell. And then the next day, Musashi's sunk, Yamato comes out, and I'm not aware that Yamato hit anything. I think if the Yamato had, certainly if the Yamato had hit either the Johnston or the Hull or the Roberts, it simply would have just vaporized the ship. I don't think the escort carriers took any rounds from 18-inch rounds. So they put all of this insane effort into these gigantic battleships that cost a fortune and they could have built hundreds of other ships with what they spent on those two. And one of them went down without ever firing a shot at another ship, and the other one eventually went down after firing a few rounds at other ships in one conflict only, and apparently didn't contribute to the sinking of any one of them. But in the best case scenario, this super battleship, the two super battleships, best case scenario. No, it's not. We'll do a long show tonight. Everybody relax about the Q&A. It didn't sink anything. That's why I've become a big believer in dispersal of assets. This idea of the super ship doesn't end well. All right. Anyway, enough of that. Sorry. So let's get on with the questions, and we'll do a longer show tonight because it's been a while, and I want to get to these questions. And I've been going on and on about stuff I talked about last week, but nevertheless, it's on my mind. So here we go. We're doing the magic scroll here. Come on, baby. All right. Let's see here. All right, so we'll do them in descending order. And Eric Blake, you're number 3, so your question will get an answer. And I know how concerned you are about that, so there you go. But we'll start with top fan Dave Olson, who says, Ben Shapiro has gotten a lot of mileage out of the phrase, facts don't care about your feelings, and that is as true as anything could be. Unfortunately, the reverse is just as true. Feelings don't care about your facts. That's quite an observation, actually. Try arguing limited government supply-side economics, or if it's otherwise known, economics, clever, with a big state Keynesian. So since we have the facts so solidly on our side, how do we make the feelings argument, which seems to be the better way to win? I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, Dave, because this is a subject that I've talked about so many times. But the short form is, when you go to see a movie, you are in a hypnotic state. You believe in vampires, you believe in spaceships, ray guns, you believe in anything. You go in there and you drop your critical reflexes and resources, and you simply open your eyes and watch in silence, and the movie carries you away, and you forget that you're in a movie theater surrounded by other people in Sherman Oaks and in the daytime, and all of a sudden you're in a castle in Transylvania in the dark, and vampire comes out of the hallway, and you leap out of your skin because you're not fully conscious in the way that we would normally describe it. It's the same thing when you watch a TV show. And it's the same thing when you play a video game as well. When you watch a TV show at home, you're watching Friends, you're not in your home. You're in their home. You're in their apartment with them. That's where your consciousness is located. And so all of the stuff that comes in with the action and the vampires and the jokes and everything also comes in, and it goes right into your subconscious, where it remains and influences your votes. So if I had a choice of presenting all of the facts or presenting a single feeling, I'd take the feeling every time. The left understands this. The left has to deal with feelings because they don't have facts. They have anti-facts. They have things that simply, they're not only not true, they're anti-true. They're the opposite of truth. They're not just wrong, they're 180 degrees away from right. So they're very good at it, and we're terrible at it, and we need to get better at it, and we need to get better at it fast because young people are reading less and less and less, and they're taking in more and more and more stuff visually, and with shorter and shorter attention spans, and none of this stuff is good for us in terms of the politics of it. So, as I've said before, the reason I'm so up on this video game thing is I like the idea of taking the adventure of the Constitution and the whole founding experience and the whole idea of a country and a republic, and instead of having it be a 250-year-old idea, I'm going to set it 1,000 years in the future, and we're going to make it something that's coming, not something that was. And that is enormously important. I don't mean to cut your question short, but I've just dealt with this many times before, so hopefully that'll answer your question here. Okay, number 2, Ian A. Little says, I've seen a worrying uptick in anti-Semitism on the right lately, and I'm not even talking about the alt-right. Why do you think this is, and how can we fight it? It may be true that some thinkers behind leftist ideologies like communism were Jewish, but it's also true that other Jewish thinkers were influential in shaping modern conservatism as well, so I don't understand where they get the idea that there's some kind of vast conspiracy going on. We noticed it too, Ian. Scott noticed it. Scott has been just unbelievable how much Scott has done around here lately. And Scott reads pretty much every YouTube comment, and he's seeing a definite increase in it. I think since you asked for an explanation, I think you're pretty much right on the pulse of it. As the society becomes more and more polarized, and as we get more and more alarmed about watching things slip away, I think it's easy for people to hear things like American Jews vote overwhelmingly for Democrats, which is a mystery to me. And I had that conversation earlier today with an employee of ours who's Jewish, and she can't understand it, and I can't understand it either. But there it is. And while it is true also that that the Bolsheviks, well, certainly Mao wasn't Jewish, but the Bolsheviks were primarily composed of people who were atheists. A significant number of them were Jewish, significant number. Trotsky being the most visible of which. And it's hard not to look at that philosophy and connect those two things, but it's just not. it's not. Communism is not a Jewish philosophy. Communism is, and socialism is not a Jewish idea either. These are just very bad ideas that have been shared by a lot of people. The reason that the Russian Revolution is so repugnant to me personally, sorry, sweetheart, is because it is so much run by intellectuals. It is done by, it's a revolution of college students is what it is. It never grew up. They just did nothing but talk about theory. So you would be a Zenobiite, or you would be a Bukharinite, or you would be a Trotskyist. And all of this stuff is about nuances on a theory from some German guy writing in London. And all of it is just plain circle jerk. That's what it is. They're sitting in their cafes in Switzerland, sitting out the first war, having a discussion about the perfect form of government without any connection to reality whatsoever. And because it was all so theoretical, if we have to kill a few 100 million people, then, the ends justify the means, right? So as long as the workers' paradise comes, and as long as we get our Dacias and our limousines and stuff, then that's what happens. Which is why my favorite, one of my favorite lines about progressives is, you can show a progressive a program that's doing really well, and he'll say, well, yes, it works in practice, but will it work in theory? It is getting uglier out there, and it's worrisome to me. And I understand why it's happening, but it's still worrisome to me. Somebody's been saying that Evan Sayet, who Natasha and I are very close to, Evan and his significant other, and Evan goes right at this, talks about it, and he understands the progressive mindset better than anyone. And as DCG44S just said, every group in the world has some dumbasses, and that's a fact. There has been, Mark Twain wrote about this. Mark Twain was really very far ahead of his time in this, and Twain's argument was that the Jews had been so universally despised because they were so good at business. They were so good at it, and since they had been culturally, since Christian, and I'm pretty sure Islamic culture as well, for most of the history, didn't allow money changing. Essentially, didn't allow the idea of profit. The idea of lending money for profit was just considered sacrilegious. Christians couldn't lend money or deal with money and make a profit. And that means you can't have a bank and you can't have anything. And so what happened was, since the Christians had this religious taboo against it, and Jews didn't, they had a long history of hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, of understanding. If you said Jews are obsessed with money, it's one way to put it, I suppose. But I think a more appropriate way to put it is to say that they alone in the world understood finance a long, long, long time before the rest of us did. And if you own stock today in anything, then you don't really get to blame the Jews for any problems that we've had, because they were just doing what you're doing now and what everybody is doing now, and that's making money with money. We would have none of this stuff, none of it, if it wasn't for money out there working for other money. When you build a skyscraper, people think, oh, we need so much concrete, and we need so much glass, and we need so much insulation, and we need elevators, we need this, we need that, we need air conditioning ducts, we need all these things. And you do. But the first thing you need is the money. If you don't have the money, that's not going to get built. If it doesn't get built, it's not going to run those businesses. Those businesses aren't going to exist. They're not going to turn a profit, and they're not going to pay the people that work in those businesses. And those families then are also suffering. So everybody's everybody today is benefiting from the kind of knowledge that was pretty much unique to Jews for most of the history in Europe. Um, it's hard to it's hard to um, it's hard to blame people for being good at something when you've basically said they're not allowed to do anything else. Uh, you know, and one of the reasons that there's such Jewish influence in the beginning of Hollywood, and I suspect also that this connects to it as well. There's a book out there called An Empire of Their Own, and basically what the book says is that at the turn of the last century, in the early 1900s, you had a number of Jewish American businessmen who certainly weren't being persecuted. There were no pogroms against them, like in Russia, and they weren't having their windows smashed like in Nazi Germany. But they simply were not. They were not allowed into the country clubs. They couldn't make the connections. They were definitely segregated in a sense. They were a lot of people that just didn't want to deal with them, and so they were primarily from the East Coast because a lot of them had come over, pretty much exclusively come over from Europe. And so they're sitting in New York and Baltimore and Philadelphia and all these other things, and they've got these business skills, but they can't really exercise them. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, right around 1910 or so, maybe a little bit later, not only does it's not a new business, it's a new kind of business. Movies and entertainment, mass entertainment, just didn't exist. And now all of a sudden, way, way out there in the wastelands called Los Angeles, in that nasty little stretch of desert out there, they're making movies, and the movies are making money. And the blue bloods descended from the Mayflower don't want anything to do with that, because actors, appropriately enough, I think actually, usually weren't allowed into towns. They were kept outside and known for loose morals and unclear thinking, and is a reputation they maintain today. So basically, what this book's premise is, An Empire of Their Own, is that show business essentially appeared out of nowhere. It just arrived out of nowhere, and so they jumped on it, and you can't argue with with Louis B. Mayer and virtually all of the moguls were Jewish, but it's not pretty, and it goes against my philosophy, and if you've been watching the show long enough, it should go against your philosophy too. There are many things that are culturally true, and there are some stereotypes that are in fact based on actual behaviors. But my theory of everything is that people are individuals, and that to the degree that they're going to be judged by me or anybody else, I judge them as individuals. I know that I would much, much, much rather be in a room full of patriotic, hardworking blacks, Jews, Hispanics, and all the rest, with not a single other white face there, than be in a room that's completely lily white, with which is essentially what progressivism is: super rich white liberals. I'd be with the patriots. I don't care what they look like. I really don't. And this is why I somehow find the courage, if you'll pardon me for saying so, to go ahead and criticize things like black culture and crime rates and Black Lives Matter, because I genuinely believe in the individual. And since I believe in the individual, I'm not too worried about, I don't say it doesn't hurt, it hurts a lot, but ultimately, if I get accused of racism, anti-Semitism, or Semitism, or whatever, it's like, hey, I'm looking at the cards on the table, but as far as my personal life is concerned, I judge people as individuals, and I've met good people and bad people from every single possible ethnic, sexual preference, religious background you can possibly imagine. I've met wonderful, excellent, patriotic, great, hardworking Muslims, gays, Jews, everybody. And I've also met people who are not so good from everywhere. So that's my tribe, and I like to belong to people who have the same values as me, and that's what makes people alike. You know, that's what makes somebody a friend and a brother. Is, you know, it's not how they look; it's how they think. It's really, when you get right down to it, it's how they act. Okay, it's time for Eric Blake's question. Now, you know, I'm just going to skip that one. I think I don't really want to. Okay, Eric Blake says, okay, I need a drink, so here's an RK question. You often use the analogy of R types being rabbits and the K types being wolves. Here's the thing, wolves eat rabbits. So, Vectron Whittle, from one K wolf to another, how do you like your R rabbit? Roasted, rotisserie, stewed, broiled, deep fried, raw and crunchable as Gollum recommends? You know, it's an interesting point, Eric. Accidentally, I have no doubt. But it's an interesting point that I think those are good analogies. I think that rabbits are a good example of R-type behavior, and wolves are a good example of K-type behavior. And while it is true that wolves will eat rabbits, the thing I find interesting is that aspect of R and K does not translate into humans. I mean, it kind of comes down to the sheepdog thing too, you know, but I mean, if you really think about it, if we're the ones who are individually based, heavily armed, trained, mentally tough, mentally prepared for things, we could very easily just simply eliminate the R types. But when you get down to actually asking the questions, what you find is that when it comes to humans, the wolves pretty much just want to be left alone, but the rabbits want to kill all the wolves. And I find that interesting. You know, but since you asked, I imagine Bernie Sanders would be rather stringy and dry. You know, you'd probably have to have some kind of a gravy, or at the very least a big bottle of ketchup. You know, for Bernie. I think if you just kind of forced to eat Elizabeth Warren, you'd be expecting it to be kind of gamey, but in the end, it would just be virtually tasteless, almost like mayonnaise. You know, Nancy Pelosi, I think. I just get the feeling that that if you were forced to eat Nancy Pelosi, that you would get mercury poisoning on a very, very high level. I just get the sense that she's just, you know, kind of top of the food chain there, and just taking up all the mercury from all the people she's kind of preyed on down below her. Let me think here. Barack Obama would taste exactly the way you wanted it to. Who am I missing? Michael Moore would, needless to say, be exceedingly fatty and just produce a lot of grease. I think, as a general rule, if I had to eat people, I'd rather eat conservatives. I think they'd be much better for you. I think I think the body mass ratio and muscle to weight ratio and all the rest of it be just far more tasty. But that's just me, and taste is Hillary. Oh, there's a challenge. Hillary, I'll give you my first instinct, Eric. Hillary, I wouldn't touch Hillary, because I think the only people that would eat Hillary, the only creatures that would eat Hillary are scavengers. You know, I don't think anybody wants to eat stuff that's been dead for a long time. I'm not interested in it. Just fry me up a southern Well, there used to be a Southern Democratic senator. There aren't many of those. Just fry me up a wine-sodded, chubby, plump, juicy Berkeley professor, and seasoned to taste. Okay, so moving on. And that was a question that I don't believe I'll soon forget, Eric. So points for you there. Sarge 56, Happy New Year, Bill. Happy New Year, Sarge, and all the rest of you. Are the Dems going to cave on the wall? What is their plan going to be, and can the Senate live with it? I don't know. Steve Darrow says Hillary's a KFC meal, has one left wing and two fat thighs. Well played, Steve. Sarge, I don't see any. This is me, since you asked. I don't see any hope for the wall. The wall had to be built in the first 2 years. It had to be built it had to be started within the first 100 days. Ann Coulter was Trump's biggest supporter. She's turned into his biggest critic. I don't oscillate quite as widely as she does. But she did make an interesting point when she said that Trump ran on the wall. Every single campaign speech was about immigration and the wall. And she said if you became president, Trump should have been, maybe not on the first day, but on day 2, he should have been down at the border supervising the building of the wall. I think she's actually got a really good point. You had 2 years, and I've been saying it from election night. Once it became clear that we had the House, the Senate, and the presidency, it's now or never. And it turned out it was never. Now, part of that, I think a significant part of that is Donald Trump not forcing it through. And he seems to have dropped the ball on that. But the main culprits are the so-called Republican congressmen who had talked about things like, oh yeah, we love the wall, and talked about things like, oh, Obamacare, the second that we get a Republican president, we're going to repeal it. And the second we got a Republican president, they all chickened out. They didn't want to face the consequences of it. They're just absolutely gutless. That first, this last Congress, the Congress that just ended, was the most disappointing bunch of cowards that I've ever seen. We remember Barack Obama when he was elected. He also had the House and the Senate behind him, and in those 2 years, the Democrats did everything. They did Obamacare. They did everything that they wanted. And I knew that we were going to have a very small amount of time. And by the time we were 1 year into Trump's presidency, I realized this isn't going to happen. There's some talk about the lame duck Congress now, that they don't have to worry about re-election, that they'll vote it in and stuff. But if that happens, it'll just get voted away. It seems to me that if you're going to go to the wall and shut down the government about the wall, the time to do that is not after you've lost the House and the source of funding. The time to do that is on day 2 of your presidency. It's day 2. Let's get this thing going. Well, we don't know about the funds. Well, it's a Republican Congress, so you would have a lot of leverage if you're Donald Trump in that case. You basically say, hey, look, the American people sent me to Washington to do 2 things. One of them is build a wall, and the other one's drain the swamp. So let's start with the wall. And why won't you vote for this, Senator or Congressman so-and-so from the X district of Y state? Why aren't you backing this? And just, applied some political pressure. I think Donald Trump's weakness in this regard is a weakness that many people saw coming. And that is, as a businessman, he gets to give orders. But the president doesn't get to order the Congress around. He doesn't just get to order it. Politics is different than business. He can't just fire congressmen. I don't want the president to have that much power. Needless to say, I think a lot of Republican congressmen needed to be fired. It turned out they were fired. But you can't just go in there and say, okay, start building. You've got to persuade people. You've got to have enough political skill to strong arm people into doing what you think needs to be done. And the way you reach a politician is through his reelection. We've said this 100 times. The Democrats' best minds go into politics, and our politicians are our third or fourth rate team. Most conservatives go into business and make a living, and don't really want to control other people's lives and do nothing but write laws for them. It'd be very, very, very difficult to find a Congress made up of people who went to Washington in order to destroy power, because the people who would be willing to destroy power, which is what I would do, I'd go to Washington, I'd just disassemble as much as I could. But the reason that this is not likely to happen is because in order to run for political office, you have to have that fire in the belly. It's an unpleasant, dreadful experience. It's made that way on purpose, and so the only people that actually survive as politicians are people who want to be politicians so badly that they're willing to put up with the process. People talk about term limits. I've been talking for one time about term limits, and I say, one term, that's it. So what's so hard about it? But really, when you get right down to it, you still can't solve the only people that shouldn't be politicians are the ones that are running. And that makes me think, I don't really think I would have a problem with something like the way juries are selected. I wouldn't want to be tried by a professional jury. Let's put it that way. If you could get a job as a professional jurist and all you did was sit there every day and go to trials and render verdicts, I wouldn't like that at all. So since we select juries from the people, and since my political philosophy is that there's a great deal of wisdom in the common people, I'll be honest with you, Sarge. I don't see how we could do any worse. William F. Buckley famously said he'd rather be governed by the first 450 names in the Boston phone book than by the faculty of Harvard, and I'm right with him on this one. You could make a fairly interesting case for. In fact, the more I think about it, the better I like it. You could select congressmen and women the same way that you select a jury. In other words, randomly bring people in, but at the same time, since you're randomly bringing in people, you can get some nuts and losers in there. So, in the same way that they select a jury, if you were to just randomly select a pool of potential congresspeople, then the Republican Party and the Democrat Party would each have 5 vetoes or 6 or 8 or 10 or whatever. And they would have to look at the opposition, and you'd actually get a pretty good government that way, because all of the right-wing and left-wing raving lunatics would be dismissed by the other side. Michael Moore, thank you for service. You can go home now because we're not going to let you sit on this jury. And that's how juries are selected. It's actually a damn good system. You don't get to keep guessing. You don't get to keep picking forever. But when you panel a jury and you find out about them, the prosecution can identify people who are likely to be sympathetic to the criminal, and they want them off the jury. The defense can find people that are likely to be sympathetic to the prosecution, and they want them off the jury. And so you end up with a relatively fair, relatively balanced system. And for those of you who've ever been on a jury, nobody wants to be. I don't know anybody who wants to be on a jury. I've been on a jury 3 times. I've been a jury foreman once. Hey, greetings from Lithuania. Happy New Year to you too. DFRSS, differs. Lithuania, that just makes me so happy. It really does. Welcome. And greetings from the United States of America and from all the ships at sea. So I think if you randomly, I really think the only way you could get around the fact that the people who want to be politicians are the ones who should not be politicians is to randomly select people and then have a process much like jury selection to make sure you got rid of the extremists and the people who couldn't read. I would certainly like to give that a try. Be nice to float that at a convention of the states, because the politicians are the problem. All politicians. Whenever you think about anything terrible that's happened, you can almost always, not in Obamacare, but almost always find bipartisan support for terrible, terrible, terrible policies. Moving on, Bob Neef? Sorry, Bob. I'm going to go with Neef. Writes, given Lizzie Warden's DNA debacle, I would have assumed that her presidential aspirations would have been crushed. Will she run? Will she win? She will certainly run, and she will certainly not win. The fact that the DNA debacle, where, for those of you who might have been camped out on another planet or something, Senator Warren was admitted to Harvard on a kind of a quota system because she claimed she was of Native American descent, that she was of Indian descent, and therefore there was a position open for minorities, and she wouldn't have gotten that position as a white applicant, although Harvard swears up and down that they would. I don't believe it. And so she basically is about the whitest person that's ever been born on the earth. You just look at her and you just think, this is a person who thinks that mayonnaise is too spicy. But she claimed she was American Indian, of American Indian heritage, because she had high cheekbones. And she got called out on this. And that happened quite a long time ago, and then it kind of died down. But then Trump called her out again. And this is really the genius of Trump, is he's just a master at trolling, really. That's all he does. So Elizabeth Warren decides she's going to go out and get a DNA test. And and to everyone's astonishment, the Barbra Streisand effect is like, if you don't want publicity to something, don't keep bringing it up. And she comes back, and it turns out that genetically it's something like 1 out of, 100, 200 of her ancestors. She's 1/2000th part Indian, and then she goes public with this to see it. I told you, I'm 1/2000th part Indian. I would be willing to bet a large amount of money that if you did that same genetic test across the entire population of the U.S., blacks included, Hispanics included, you would find significantly higher percentage of people. You would find that most people had a significantly higher percentage of Indian blood than Elizabeth Warren. I bet you'd find that Elizabeth Warren, with her DNA thing, is in fact as far from being as far from having Indian blood as it's possible to have, practically. She's so the question isn't, the question isn't just that. I mean, that to me is a character issue and a disqualifying issue and so on. But the question is, why do people support that? And people support that because the people that support progressive candidates will overlook anything. They'll overlook actual rape in the case of Bill Clinton. They'll overlook treason in the case of Hillary Clinton. They'll overlook anything so long as they believe that that person is going to do, bring the workers' paradise. So it's a religious belief for them, and they don't see past it. And so, there you go. I personally would love it if she was the Democratic nominee, but we're not going to be that lucky. And she's not going to be the VP either. Kamala Harris is going to be the VP. Okay, so hey, top fan Patrick Reed writes, I hear a lock at the door. Is it our cleaning service? It is. Excuse me one moment. Hey, how are you?
How are you?
We're good. We're good tonight. Thank you.
Okay.
So have a good night. Happy New Year. See ya. Okay, so here we go. Top fan Patrick Reed writes, so with the changes in your life since your nuptials, I thought I had my nuptials removed when I was in my teens. I seem to remember something along those lines. Anyway, whatever. And the selling of the Long Easy, do you feel like you've come to terms with the kid who only ever wanted to be a fighter pilot and an astronaut? Do you feel like you've killed the boy and become the man that you always wanted to be? Well, now I will be damned if that's not an excellent question, Patrick. I'm proud and happy to say, no, I have not killed the boy. But I have found that he's not in charge anymore. I wouldn't want to kill that guy. He's a good kid, and he's a fighter, and he's dedicated and passionate. But at the same time, you know, he's a kid. What I found about being married is not that growing up chases away that boyish quality of mine. It stays there, but it's not running the show anymore. And I'm very happy about that. I've always been very forthcoming about a lot of things on the show, and it's, I guess, one of the appeals of the show. Lately, when I say lately, I want to say maybe in the last 2 months or so, I've been undergoing regular hypnotherapy classes, and I've always sessions, I should say, one-on-one sessions, and I've always had mixed feelings about hypnosis, but I'm convinced it really is exceedingly effective. All I can tell you is that the reason I did this was because there have been a number of scripts that have been running in my life that are just plain destructive, or at the very least not productive. And when you keep doing something that when you keep doing something that you don't want to do, there's probably a pretty good reason for that. And the hypnotherapy has been really effective. Really effective. Not because you go into this state where you simply become, I will now, kill the president. It's just the results that it has on me is when I find myself doing something that I have identified as something that I don't want to do, then that little flag just appears in my consciousness. It just goes ding, Didn't you say something about not being so angry on driving? As a matter of fact, I did. Thanks for pointing that out for me. You're welcome. Back down it goes. And I calm down. When do I start clucking like a chicken, Matt Harris asks. And, I say, I've seen, there's a TED Talk on hypnosis. There's a number of them, but I saw one on hypnosis after I started getting the hypnotherapy. And I'm not making this up. These guys that do kind of show hypnosis, like the people who do Vegas shows, hypnosis shows, those are not plants. Those people are real. But what my understanding of hypnosis has been is that a guy on stage can simply look at an audience and within 10 seconds identify which people out there are likely to become hypnotizable, susceptible to it. And so I'm watching this video on YouTube, and the guy says, "Okay, well, I'm going to do this," and he got some people to cluck like a chicken. But he said early, "I'm going to ask the audience, do this," and he basically said, just concentrate, relax on this, and then he said, "Okay, you close your eyes, and when I tell you, you will not be able to open your eyes. You will, no matter how hard you try, you will not be able to open your eyes. The harder you try, the less able you will be to open your eyes." And I closed my eyes, and I couldn't open them, and I was fighting. I was like, "Open your eyes, open your eyes, open." Just couldn't do it. And that was actually incredibly cool. I thought that was just out of the park cool. And it was only when I said to myself, "You can open your eyes now," when I countermanted the initial suggestion. I suspect I'm pretty susceptible to hypnosis because a lot of it is having a good imagination. I've always had a good imagination, ability to visualize things. Somebody said, hypnotherapy and not cognitive therapy. I think I've gone about as far as I can with cognitive therapy. Um, there comes a point when you get to know yourself well enough to know what your problems are, and you also get to know yourself well enough, if you have the courage to do this. It requires a great deal of courage, believe it or not. And there comes a point when you realize, this is what I want to do, but I'm not doing it. So why am I not doing it? And the reason is not because of not. It's not that I'm aware. Cognitive therapy helps you say, hey, this is a bad idea. You should be doing this. That's basically cognitive therapy. Hypnotherapy became useful for me when I said, you know what, that's bad for me. I should stop doing that, and I keep doing it. So why do I keep doing it? Why? And I don't know how much of this I really want to release, but I will probably go ahead and tell you most of it, because it's what the show's all about. So I learned some very, very, very interesting things, and it's funny you mentioned. The kid and the fighter pilot and stuff. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of gory details, but basically the short form is, based on my childhood and how I was raised, and the environment I was raised in, I have had in me from a very, very early age kind of a paladin, kind of a complex, a sense that I have to protect people, and a responsibility for people that I don't even know. And that goes back a long, long way. And as a result of some of this therapy, I found out the incredible degree of guilt that I was feeling because I couldn't stop these things. And that goes back to being 5 or 6 years old, and that stuff just stayed in there, and you keep fighting it. And the reason I'm doing the work I'm doing is because I'd like to save the country, and there are times when I feel like it is my responsibility, and I'm not living up to that responsibility. I carry around a lot of weight on this kind of thing. And I found, to my utter amazement, that what I was most emotionally driven by was the fact that I didn't have a chance to go and prove myself. I didn't have a chance to go and see what I'm made out of. You don't hear that too often these days, but right around the time of World War II, this would be a very understandable emotion. And I found myself like really just breaking down and sobbing because I wasn't part of the Battle of Britain. That's an odd thing to admit. And as I said, it requires courage. Courage just to look at the issue, and probably more courage to tell a bunch of complete strangers about it. But really and truly, I was just choking with emotion because I didn't get a chance to go and fight the Battle of Britain in a Spitfire. And my wife has understood me from the beginning. She's the only person in the world who really understands me, and I'm the only person who really understands her. And she put her finger on it real early. And when I had this realization about this, she said, Billy, it's easy to go up there and get killed. That's easy. It's staying down here and doing this every day. That's hard. And I realized that's really true. I never had a death wish because when I would drive fast, I would drive fast carefully. And when I would fly experimental airplanes, I would take enormous amounts of care to make sure that that I had the training that I needed, and that the equipment was in its best possible shape. And having survived 3 engine failures in single-engine airplanes, I never, ever felt like my life was in danger because I knew for an absolute fact I could land those airplanes anywhere. I'm a glider pilot. So it wasn't like it was a death wish, but it was a sense that I had it was actually a weird form of survivor's guilt, believe it or not. It really was. I don't know how else to describe it, and I just realized how deeply ashamed I was of not being able to go and actually fight, Uh, and so, without question, the most powerful thing that's ever happened to me in my life, uh, the situation with Foghorn and getting actual Air Force pilots and getting an actual call sign was so deeply important to me because it was so far ingrained into my mind. But actually, the most powerful thing that I've ever experienced doing the work I do came very early. I want to say during the first year or two when I was doing eject, eject, eject. And I was just writing these essays, and I got a letter from a guy. And he said, Bill, I was, just so you know, I was on the first wave ashore at Iwo Jima, and I think you're worth a battalion. And I just completely was about to lose it now. It's like, wow. I don't. It's hard to. It's hard to believe it. Uh, it's. I still don't believe it. I don't believe any of it. I mean, it is on some level. Just the fact I'm sitting here talking right now is still um, uh, kind of amazing to me. But yeah. So so to answer your question, Patrick, there's a great deal about that mindset that I admire and that I don't want to lose and that I won't lose. It's good to be a fighter, and it's good to have a passion for things, and it's good to wake up every day and decide that, bad things are happening to good people, and I'm going to do everything I can to do what I can to stop it. Those are good qualities, and I'm not going to lose those. But to carry responsibility for it, and to find yourself kind of sabotaging yourself because you feel this sort of shame that you didn't get a chance to, that you talk about people who actually fight and risk their lives, and that you tell history stories like I did for the first hour of the show, and you're good at telling these stories, Bill, but you weren't actually there, and on some level that kind of makes you, an imposter. And I feel this very strongly, and I and I and I, yeah, again, I'm reluctant to say I suffered from it because I know what actual people really do suffer from. And I guess this is a habit of mine too, is to kind of sometimes I just underestimate the you know, ah, I'm fine, kind of thing. But I didn't I didn't need to be owned by that anymore, and that entire that entire what's the word? That entire program, let's just say, was a program written by a 5, 6, 7 year old, and and I'm not 5, 6, 7 anymore. At least not all the time. Never could have done any of this without my wife. I never would have grown up without her. I look back on my life before I met her, and I don't know how I fit into that. I don't know how I fit into that person. I've just grown so much. I just don't know how I fit into the person I was before I met her. It's almost actually amazing to me. Um, and this is what having that kind of love and support will do for you. It'll give you the courage to go and look at these things that have been down there. But I'll tell you one last thing about this issue. So the actual hypnosis is not something where I have no idea what this person said. I'm lying there. I'm extremely relaxed, and suggestions are being given to me based on what I'd like to adjust. And I wake up and I have this enormous stretch, fully awake, and then I forget completely about what happened. It's not like I blank it out. I just, like everything else, I just forget about it. It's like I forgot about what I had for dinner 3 nights ago. But what happens is that when I find myself doing one of these things that I am trying to adjust, I find that it suddenly enters my conscious mind that I'm doing it. And then at the very least, then I have the choice of deciding whether I want to keep doing it or not. Before, it would just be a reaction. I'll give you a good example of this. Um, One of the things that come with my personality type um, is a real strong sense of injustice. I just hate it. I hate injustice. I hate criminals. I hate people who steal. Uh, I hate it in my bones. I just physically hate it, and I'm pretty much of a Boy Scout when it comes to following rules and stuff. So a couple weeks ago, we've been using a lot of Uber Eats and home delivery food stuff. We think it's just great. It's fantastic. So I don't know, 2, 3 weeks ago, I ended up finding out that I'd previously placed 62 orders with uh, Uber Eats, and I ordered this order, and I was busy. I don't know what the hell was I doing. I was probably on a train on Hurston someplace, and so the person texted me, but my phone is on Do Not Disturb, and so every single other Uber driver ever delivering food has come up to the door. It's a short little walk. Come up to the door, knock the door. This person didn't come to the door, waited outside for 12 minutes, then disappeared, took my order with them, and Uber Eats says, we're, your order's been canceled, and we're not going to refund your money. And I just thought about all the stories about my dad and how he had run his hotel, and I told the story 100 times about how he comped this dinner to this guy because he told me as a little boy I would rather make $20,000 off of this guy than $20 off of this guy. And so this Uber Eats thing offended my sense of justice enormously. And I had really, honestly, for a couple hours there, I was just going to, I was going to launch a jihad. I was going to do a firewall about it, about bad business practices and short-sightedness and just all of this stuff. I was absolutely livid. And I was livid because I felt like I had been treated unfairly. And even if I had been wrong about this, and according to their policies, I am wrong about this, they're not required to come to the door. But I did say to myself, you're going to sit out on the curb for 12 minutes in front of my house, and you're not going to knock on the door? I mean, I'd asked Natasha to wait by the door since I knew I was going to be out of touch for a while. And I felt very offended by it, and the response I kept getting was that, well, we're very sorry, but there's nothing we can do about it. So you're really telling me you want to lose my business? How many orders have I made with you? 62. Well, I'm probably going to make another 62 within the next several months. You really telling me you're going to throw all of this away because you're not going to refund me this $35 order that your person didn't knock on the door and deliver? I'm sorry, sir, this is our policy. And I said, okay, that's it. I'm going to delete the app, and I'm going to just launch a Facebook campaign, and I'm just going to go after him, and I'm going to do all of that. And then the very next day, I was dealing with issues of being judgmental and issues of being that obeying the rules was to that degree was not healthy for me. Let me rephrase that. Was not healthy for me to expect other people to hold themselves to the standards that I hold myself to, which are exceedingly strict standards. And so I had this session, and I was going to delete the app and launch this jihad against Uber Eats. And I got home that day, and I thought, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Technically speaking, they're right. It's not like they stole my money. I was offended. My sense of justice was offended, and I was going to get my retribution by God. And if I had to call down lightning and thunder, then that's what I was going to do. And I threatened him with it too. And I just suddenly realized this is really, really childish. This is just dumb. It's dumb. Let it go. And and to my utter amazement, I did. I just let it go, and found myself cut off in traffic 2 days after this incident. And I could just feel it. I could feel it coming up. It's like, use it. And then, because that was a script that was running. It was a button that had been pushed, and I was running the script that goes back a long way and is not good for me or anybody else for that matter. And as I started to get into that mode, once again, this little bell, like it's like a little thought just ding, appears out of nowhere. It's like, really need to be this angry about this, honestly? Is it really, really that important? That this person merged in front of you without giving you enough room or a turn signal? Is this really worth the stress it's going to cause you and all the rest of it? Do you really need to have your next 2 or 3 hours just ruined by the fact that somebody did something that you wouldn't do because you're a better driver than this person? Is it really worth it? And that's the power of the hypnotherapy. It doesn't make you not get angry or whatever your particular problem happens to be, but it does ring a bell when it happens, and it makes you aware that it's happening, and it's not just an automatic reflex anymore. Now it's a choice. And I don't always make the right choice, but most of the time I do. There have been a couple times where something happened and the bell went ding, and I said, do you really want to do this, Bill? This is not good for you. And I said, yeah, I really do. I really do. I know it's not good for me. I don't care. I'm gonna be this pissed off for a while. But that's childishness, and it's a tough thing to let go of. To be honest with you, not just getting angry about things, but childishness in general is a tough thing to let go of. But in 4 months and 5 days, I'm going to be 60. I'm not going to be 40. I'm not going to be 50. I'm going to be 60 years old in April. And that's probably old enough to stop running scripts that I wrote for myself that served me very, very well when I was 5, 6, 7 years old. And I wanted to get rid of them, and it works. It really, really does work, but you got to be willing to do it. And finally, one of the things that this is an exercise that you can do, and I would strongly advise you to do it only because you are likely to be astonished by it. It's extremely simple, but just ask yourself a question, any question, like, why am I so disorganized? Or just whatever it is, just pick anything. Just write it down. Now, I'm not kidding about this, seriously. If you really want to know how powerful your subconscious mind really is and how much it controls everything you do, I couldn't be more serious about this. I cannot recommend this highly enough. It's not dangerous, not gonna put you in any trouble or anything. But write down a sentence that you are interested in that's important to you. Whatever it is. Why am I having problems with my oldest son? Whatever it is. Write it down on the page. And here's the thing, it's called automatic writing. You take a pen in your hand and you start writing, and you just don't stop writing for 15 minutes. Don't stop, ever. It doesn't matter what you write, it just matters that you don't stop writing. Just constantly writing. And you're going to find that the first paragraph or page is going to be real rational and real normal. Well, I'm angry at my son because my son, doesn't treat me with respect. And you're going to list all these things that are going to start making sense. And then all of a sudden, you're going to hear something come up, and you're going to go, "What the?" And you gotta just push through that. You can't do it on a keyboard. You've got to write it out in handwriting, because it is the mechanical motion of your hand, and as long as you don't stop, there comes a point when your brain basically shuts off, and rather than reading a teleprompter of what I'm going to say, it just starts coming out, and you will hear things, and you will want to write things that will simply blow you away. And if you have the courage to write those down and you keep going, you will be amazed at what comes out. And what comes out is the stuff that's actually working on you 24/7 without you realizing it. Um, it's running your life, and I think you got a right to know what's running your life. Um, I was talking about, there are various exercises that this therapist does to deal with things like, forgiving people and dealing with anger and all the rest of it. But what's really astonishing to me, like for instance, one of these, I'm not going to get into the details of it because it just sounds more corny than it is. You just have to be in the hands of a good person, a good therapist, and it makes sense. But anyway, we were doing this visualization exercise about all the times I'd ever felt like I'd been wronged by people. And, so I start at the top, and I start thinking about what Media Matters wrote about me, about being a scientific racist. And I started thinking about all these high-level things. And the next thing I know, I am thinking about being at a bus stop in 7th grade on Key Biscayne with the Ferguson brothers throwing these tiny little ladyfinger firecrackers at me. And I hadn't thought about that for 50 years. Something like that. And so why did I think about this? How is it possible that I could have thought about something that happened to me when I was in 7th grade? How is it? It makes sense that I think about the Media Matters things. It makes sense that I would think about the things that I've been, accused of. It makes sense that I think about things like the Uber Eats thing. But why would number 3 or number 4 of the things that I remember when I'm trying to think of things that I thought were people had done me wrong? Why did I go right back to a bus stop in 7th grade? Remember it like it was yesterday. I hadn't thought about it for 40 years. Why did I go back there? And the reason I'm saying this is because it's still there. It never went away. If it had gone away, I couldn't have remembered it. But I did remember it, and I remembered it pretty fast, which means that it has a it means that it had existed in my head the whole time and was contributing to my behaviors to this day. I would be driving in traffic in 2018, going to work at the studio, and if somebody did something that I didn't like, then the anger that I felt at having these 2 douchebags throwing these little firecrackers at me was driving that reaction. And who needs it? Who needs it? So this automatic writing thing, I cannot praise it highly enough. If you do, and it's not hard to do, you just really have to just start writing. You got to write the question down so you know what you're thinking about. Start writing. The first couple of sentences or paragraphs or even page or two will make perfect sense, and then things will start coming out, and then you will run into things where you literally go, oh my God. I've had that happen to me several times now in the last several months. Just like, really? I can't. I remember writing one thing. I'm not going to tell you what it is really particularly, but yeah, I'll tell you what though. I was writing about something or this and this and this and this, and I was saying, maybe this, and maybe it'd be a way for me to make up for being such a rotten kid. And I remember thinking, no, rotten's a little strong, Bill. You were never a rotten kid. I'm editing myself. I'm starting to, I'm starting to clean up the act. I'm starting to clean up the reaction because it was so shocking to me because I wasn't a rotten kid. But out it came, out it came. Someone back there the whole time has been saying, you're a rotten kid. And you need to know these things. You don't need to, but it's helpful. So then you start asking yourself, okay, well, where did this come from? It's not true. It's not like I have any conflict about this. I know I wasn't a rotten kid. I was a good kid. But I felt like a rotten kid somehow, somewhere back there. And I have a pretty good idea why I felt like a rotten kid. And it had nothing to do with me. But you start to realize that things that maybe things that don't get done in your life, or things that you know you should do or could do and you don't do, and you don't know why you don't do them. Well, because you're not gonna do them because you're a rotten kid, and you don't know that these things are going on. And the beautiful thing about hypnotherapy is it just, like I said, it just rings the bell. Doesn't make the decision for you. It just rings the bell, and that's just a very, very, very useful thing to have. Trying to think of this one. Just had one thing fly right out of my mind. There's another really like a shocking example. Anyway, I remember. The things like the movies, and I could be moving faster on this video game thing. I'm needless to say, I've got an awful lot of work to do. But I could be moving faster on it. I say, you've been waiting for this your whole life. Why aren't you moving faster on it? Why aren't you doing this? Why? Why is this taking you so long? And what I discovered was pretty shocking. I wrote it down. It was just automatic writing. I wrote it down, and I wrote essentially, I'm not moving on this as fast as I should, because if I do, that means I'll die. And I looked at that. I said, where the hell did this come from? And what I think I was able to track it down to was, I'd always known that things like, big bad problems and movies and all these other things were things that I was capable of doing, wanted to do, and would have the chance to do in the future sometime. And that the final act of my life would be doing the things that I've been wanting to do for the other acts in my life, which is basically get out there and use all of my abilities and talents, and have the tools I need to do the best work I could do in terms of storytelling and in terms of having an impact and making a difference. And I always knew that it was out there in the future, and I always knew that I knew in my bones that this was going to be what I was going to do with, this is what I was eventually going to do someday. And then I suddenly realized that as long as that is in the future, I can live forever. Because if that's what I'm going to be doing before I go, and it is what I'm going to be doing before I go, as long as I'm not doing it, I don't have to go. That's strange. And then you're confronted with, why aren't you doing this? And instead of not knowing, instead of just, I'll get to it tomorrow. Instead of I'll get to it tomorrow. It's like, you're not going to actually die, if you do this. In fact, just the opposite, Bill. You know it. Just the opposite. You have, like everybody else on this planet, you have a limited amount of time, and every day that you don't do it is not a day you get to live longer. It's a day you lose. And how you can't come to grips with fixing something that deep unless you are ready to first of all go and get the work done and find somebody to guide you through it. But really what it comes right down to is, are you willing to write down on a piece of paper that the reason I don't get things done is because I'm afraid it will kill me. I'm afraid that's going to make me die. If you don't have that courage, if you hear it and then you say, okay, well, that's not true, obviously it's not true, and you just blow it by, you missed a really good opportunity to help yourself. You have to have the courage to write down what comes into your head. You have to have the courage to write down, I was a rotten kid, not I wasn't as good as I wanted to be, not that's what came up, and that means that's what I thought. On some level, it's what I thought. And I don't think that today. I genuinely don't, and I really genuinely don't. But these things go into your subconscious mind, and depending on how much trauma you've been through, those reactions are there to protect you. And generally speaking, the harder you've had, harder time you've had as a kid, I'm not talking about material hardship. I'm just talking about, you know, emotional turmoil in your life. The more of that you've had, the more you've written these defensive scripts to protect yourself, and they did a good job of protecting you, but they protected you when you were 7. And there's no reason to keep running. You don't need to. I don't need to live my life according to the rules of 7-year-old Bill, who was a fine fellow, I might point out, and still is. A really solid kid, and well, you know, I guess on some level this is what I do. Real early on in these sessions, you know, she talks you into finding a place that's just really comfortable and relaxing and peaceful and beautiful. I went right back to the beach in Bermuda, you know, pink coral sand and warm water and clear water, and I could see a little pompano dashing through the water there like I used to, and then I'm just closed my eyes and I'm visualizing this, and I saw this shark approaching, and I remember thinking, oh crap, a shark, and then instead of having this reaction like, you know, shark, it was like, go away, shark, and the shark just turned around and go away. What's amazing is almost immediately I saw my 7-year-old self, and I got a chance to talk to my young self and tell my young self that all the things that I didn't know how to do and all the things that were big mysteries to me and absolutely confusing and terrifying, that you're gonna get all of those things straightened out. You're gonna meet this woman who loves you, and you're gonna help people, and you're gonna make a difference, and you don't have to run it anymore, Billy. You know, you don't have to run this show anymore. I can handle it from here, and I can handle it from here because I'm an adult. And the relief is really pretty amazing. The idea that you can go back and be your own parent in a weird sort of way. It's almost like altering the timeline, you know. It's like a science fiction thing where you go back and almost parent yourself, and it almost rewrites your own history internally in a way, because it goes back and explains to you things that you didn't know. And it's a very difficult thing to understand, and I have a very hard time explaining it, but nevertheless, it makes a big difference. And you realize that on some level, you know, on a survival level, obviously I'm capable of doing things that a 7-year-old's not able to do. I can fly an instrument approach. I can produce the worst produced show on the internet. These things are things that I can do. But on some level, the fundamental scripts were written by a boy who's trying to figure things out. And most people, or at least people, it used to be most people. I don't know how many people it is nowadays, but people with good parents don't develop those kind of pathologies because they don't have to. They don't have to worry about how to run the world when they're 7, because they have parents that do that for them. And if you don't have that fundamental sense of security, you will find that you have had to take on responsibilities that are so far beyond your ability that you spend the rest of your life running away from them, and this is why you drink, or this is why you do drugs, or this is why you gamble, or this is why you're a womanizer, cheating on your wife, all that stuff. It's a lack of having had the security of knowing that you didn't have to be responsible for yourself and the world at age 5. Now, I was not in any danger of being thrown out of my house, and we were not dirt poor and wondering where our next meal is going to come from. But nevertheless, you know, that's the impression I got, was that this is up to me. I gotta figure out a way to fix this stuff and and I got to figure out a way to do all these things. And it comes a point when it's like, you know what, this is too much. This is too much for a 7-year-old kid to be dealing with. So I kind of went back in time and I relieved him of duty. I said, you can come off the wall now. You don't have to do this anymore, because I'll do it now. So little Billy, you can go back and be a kid and play, and grown up capable Bill, with the help of his amazing wife,